Hello and welcome. This is Hawkissimo bringing you another Smite video aimed at folks who are learning to play gods and want to branch out their portfolio of gods in the casual mode, specifically Clash, my favorite, Arena, Joust, or Siege. In this edition, we're going to talk about Kukulkan, Serpent of the Nine Winds, the Mayan mage. As you can see, I have him at Diamond, and I think he's a great choice to expand out from the free gods and pick up into your portfolio. He brings a lot of power and holds his own. So, without further ado, let's hop right into it and go into the ability builder. All right. So I'm not going to spend too much time going over this, but I'll simply let you look at the sequence that's in your 1 through 20. As always, if they're blank, it means that you haven't set up your custom ability builder progression order, which I highly, highly, highly recommend, which is why we're here right now. So please populate along as you see. I have you starting with your whirlwind. I have you go back into Zephyr. I have you picking up the slipstream for an escape and then coming back into whirlwind, and then I'm really having you pick up Zephyr before you come back into whirlwind. I feel that getting access to both, since the cooldown times are very different, and the ability to pop that slow and increment the slow effect is important. So I don't want you to just concentrate on one or just concentrate on the other, which is why I have you alternating. I think you'll feel much safer in lane as a consequence, and that's important. Obviously, particularly important if you're in conquest, but really it's just important to have lane presence and feel safe. The ultimate is it's not the biggest priority, and you see that reflected in the above sequence, because I have you pick it up at 5th level, ignore it till 13th, then hit it again at 16th, 19th, and 20th. But to tell you the truth, if you wanted to hit it at 5th and then ignore it till 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, I'd be perfectly fine with that. And the reason for that is all you're getting is additional damage, but you're not. It doesn't have a damage, or I'm sorry, incremental effect to the damage, so that's not like it comes with slow or anything cool like that increases as you're gaining more levels. So the knockup doesn't get even better with each rank, and your cooldown isn't coming down. So for those reasons, it should not be the priority, and in fact, being able to cast the abilities that you're going to have on rapid cooldown is going to give you much more presence and reward for your play. So that explains the progression above. Obviously, Slipstream does provide incremental benefits to the speed, but the reality is, 40 is a fine, healthy start point. So I don't think progressing this super aggressively serves great reward. The only reason why I think it merits some additional attention is to bring that cooldown lower so that you can chase with it as well as have it as an escape mechanic. So there's the thought process there. On the passive, it's very important to keep this in mind with Kuka. Kuka hits one of the hardest hitting gods in the game because of this passive. He's converting 5% of his total mana into increased magical power, and since mana comes built into a lot of the items that are there, it means that he hits hard. Plus, he's got fantastic scaling on his ultimate. Not great scaling here, no scaling here, but good scaling here. So all in all, when you hit with your ult, believe me, people notice. All right, into the item build. So I can see here that I still have it set up my old template way. I'm going to just gut through it and go through it as stands. I have you starting with Sands of Time. I think this is the go-to starter item for mages. Odds are if you're starting with something else, you're making a mistake. There's just too much bang for your buck in this item. It's 20 power. It's 5 MP5, it's got 10% cooldown, and then it's got a passive that gives you even more MP5 as your overall mana pool gets reduced. So lets you really have the sustain that the other items frankly just don't provide anywhere near as close. Definitely go pen boots. Do not go into cooldown boots. I know you're thinking, hey, but Hawk, that passive converts some of this over into additional power. Yeah, but it's only 5%, and we want the penetration to punch through the initial armor that everybody has by going up level and starting, and not even considering the fact that they're building additional armor. So definitely get the penetration boots. Go ahead and pick your starter items or your starting consumables rather. I think in the casual modes, the chalices are great because they refill with 3 of the health potions every time you go back to Fountain, and you go back a lot more outside of Conquest. So this is very, very viable once you make one trip back. If you've used the 3 potions on your first time out and you've gone back, it's now paid for itself. Every time you back thereafter, you're ahead of the game. By all means, wards, wards, wards. Great stuff in casual mode if you're getting frustrated because other people aren't warding and you just want to throw in the towel and pick up mana potions. Sure, I understand. But, you know, if you're in a game with me, you'll notice I drop wards. If you're in a game with my clan, you'll notice they drop wards. If you see wards being dropped by your party members, you know, join them in that. You know, wards beget wards. All right, on to the main build. This is a very, very standard mage build. So, you know, if you have any doubts about your build for any generic mage, this is it. You go into this progression, you eventually sell your starter item and pick this up, and you're in rock solid ground. Okay, that said, let's talk about them and why they're in the sequence that they're in, because it's not just enough to have the right items, you have to have them in the right progression where you're not getting the best bang for your buck. So let's talk about that a little bit. In terms of Bancroft's Talon, there's very little that gives you as much bang for your buck as this item does, and I'm talking about this purple horn here. It's under attack lifesteal or offense lifesteal. The reason is that you're getting 100 power, and here you can see 100 power, you see 75, and this is tricky because it's an aura, so it's not really 40, it's 70, but I have a video that talks about auras, so if you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch that aura video. But more importantly, as you lose health, as you're getting damaged, doesn't matter what that source is, you're increasing both the magical power that you get and the magical lifesteal, which really lets you counterattack very, very aggressively. And so for 2,300 gold, you could be having as much as 200 power and as much as 40% lifesteal. Obviously, that's a hell of a lot of bang for your buck, and it's why we build this early, not late. You're trying to get that early advantage. You're trying to get that lifesteal so that you have the early sustain while your other items are coming in. So that's the thought process of getting that. By this point, you really want to add more pen to your build so that you're hitting as close as possible to true damage. So let's talk about the different penetration items and why you would want to build one item versus the other. In fact, just me coming over here reminds me that I should do a video just about penetration. So I'll try and do that maybe even later tonight. So you have 3 flat pen items in this tree. That's these 3, meaning that they simply, in the upper section, talk about 10 magical penetration, 15 magical penetration, 20 magical penetration, and then you have a percentage penetration item. So here you can see that the passive is giving you 33% magical penetration. So what's the difference, and when should I buy one versus the other? And hey, Hawk, how come I see people building Obsidian Shard here? Why aren't you advising I do this? Well, let's explain this. In the early game, people have lower amounts of physical defense. So let's talk about a 60 defense as a very common number. And really in the much later stages, that 15th level, you'll start to see that, or even 20th level. If you have a 33% magical penetration that this is giving you, you're getting 20 effective penetration. So for 300 more gold, you could still get that same amount of penetration, but you'll pick up 20 additional power and 10% cooldown, and the passive that stacks on top of that, which says, hey, if you get a kill or an assist, you'll knock down all your cooldowns by 1 second. So percentage pen, Titan's Bane and Obsidian Shard, late game, once people have tanked up and once you're pushing objectives harder, objectives being the towers, the phoenixes, the Titan, Apotheosis, Gold Fury, Fire Giant, all of that nonsense. But early flat pen always better. So Spear of the Magus, also very good with Kuka. Specifically, Spear of the Magus is the go-to item when you have dot damage, or damage over time, if you want to think of it like that. So Kuka's Whirlwind is in fact dot. It's doing damage on ticks over the course of several seconds. So that becomes very effective. But again, we have to compare the two items. Am I doing all of my damage to that one ability? Because none of my other abilities are tick. They're all burst damage. So in that instance, these two are better for that because they come with a higher power amount. Plus, they provide, well, in the case of this, more variety in the effects and a greater amount of flat pen. Divine Ruin, you should always keep in mind whenever you're facing people with powerful heals, whether you're talking about like a Hercules that's driving you nuts because he keeps self-healing, or you're facing a team with, Sylvanas and Chang'e in it, and you're like, "Dah!" They have so much sustain because of all that heal. Well, pick up Divine Ruin and blow your abilities on them and watch all that healing get reduced for 8 seconds, which is an eternity. Plus, it has great power and pen. So all very viable. I like Spear of the Magus here in this section. Now let's talk about Book of Thoth. Book of Thoth, by all means, there's plenty of reason why one should build this early to get the stacks, and I understand and agree with that thought process, but it's not the only valid thought process. So let's talk about this item and why that's so. When you first buy it, it is flat out awesome without any stacks. Why is it awesome? Well, it's a little bit more expensive than Bancroft's Talon, for instance. They each have 100 power, but let's look at what else it's giving you, right? So you get 125 mana, nice, but not really that important. You're never buying the item because of the mana, but it works nicely with Kuka's passive. It has MP5, again, not why you're buying the item, but it's nice because it helps provide extra sustain. So in and of itself, just right off the bat, it's got good stuff that's coming with it. The passive is what turns it over the tide, but it really has two passives. I really wish they had listed passive one and then the second passive. So let's look at that second passive first. And I'm talking specifically this section that says additionally 3% of your mana is converted to magical power. So as soon as you build it, you have a mana pool, right? And instantly you're converting 3% of that over to power. And remember, Kuka already converted 5% of that, so you're getting 8% of that converted over. That's what makes this item so crucial for Kuka. If you are not building this item with Kuka, you're not playing Kuka right, period. There's no argument that can be made that's valid, that counters that thought. And it's because the initial passive. And that says you're going to get 10 additional mana per stack. You're going to get 5 stacks when you kill a god, and 1 stack for a minion, and it can hold up to 75 stacks. That's an additional 750 mana. You add that to the 125, now we're at 875 mana that's coming, that you're converting 3% of because of this item, and 5% of because of your passive on Kuka. That says if you aren't building this, you're just flat out crazy. So that's the math behind it. I hate when people tell you things, but they don't tell you why, and they don't justify their position, because They may be crazy. So at this point, I still go power over pen. We already have flat pen in through our boots, and we built a pen item, so we've got a healthy 30 amount of pen. At that point, we want to scale in some more power and really punch people in the teeth. There is no item that's better at that than Rod of Tahuti. Again, it has the highest amount of power on an item in the magic tree overall with 125, but more than that, it has that awesome passive that says, hey, you know all that magic power that you've been accumulating through your items and just leveling? Well, just have 25% more flat up. And yes, that stacks with the book, and yes, that stacks with Kuka's passive. So you got to pick this up with Kuka. Again, if you're not building this with Kuka, in fact, if you're a mage, not a guardian, but if you're a mage and you have reasonable power scaling on your abilities, and you're not picking this up, you're missing the effectiveness of that particular god. So that's the thought process here. Finally, we said we'd sell the starter item and we pick up this. And we showed it to you before, but just in case you're snoozing, let's go back into the tree. This is where you get your 33% penetration. Yeah, you can get more flat pen, but this is the point where, you know, if you haven't won the game and you've gotten to this point of the game, you guys have slacked on pushing objectives. You've forgotten that this is an objective-based game. It's not a kill game. You could have 5,000 kills, and you know what? If you don't kill the Titan, you lose. So how do you kill the Titan? You got to rip towers and phoenixes. How do you do that? With this item. So pick it up. Plus, it'll help you punch through any armor that people have built and any tankiness that's intrinsic to the character. So mucho importante. Normally I would have hopped into relics first, but let's do that now. I think these two are rock solid. I think other viable choices. Well, let's think about that for a moment, right? So if Loki is harassing you, if you find you're getting ganked, Shield of Thorns isn't the worst thing in the world. I tend to use it as just counter Loki, or if I keep engaging in team fights, and you know, in Clash that certainly happens a lot. So that's certainly viable. Sundering Spear is still pretty darn good, so I wouldn't argue about that. If you wanted the comfort of having the health and mana restore to not only yourself but your team, particularly when you buy the upgraded version of this to help push down those late game objectives, absolutely viable. You know, the longer that you and the hunter with Titan's Bane can be banging against those objectives, the faster they get ripped, the faster you win. By all means, legit. After that, I really wouldn't go into too many more things. It just doesn't make sense in the modes that we're talking about. Maybe Bracer of Undoing, in its upgraded or unupgraded versions. They're both good. In 4.10, this gets even better because the times are going to last a little bit longer. But it's not just the health restore that's important here, but it's also the knocking of 3 seconds off your abilities that are on cooldown, which can get you out of problem spots by bringing damage back to bear or bringing your escape to bear. So I think that scales out the various options that you can take for relics. I don't have a B build constructed for Kuka because I really feel like this is a rock solid build. You know, Kuka was one of my early diamonds. I still enjoy playing him. If, however, you felt like you wanted to go into a little bit of defense, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, the more defense you have, the greater the percentage of damage that you're reducing incoming. So good defensive items would be either of these two robes. Situationally, this one can be very important. So if, for instance, Ares is giving you nightmares because he keeps throwing his ult and pulling you in with the chains, or Hades is on the board and he's driving you nuts, if Fenrir keeps popping his ult on you and dragging you under enemy tower, and their whole team pounds on you. You know, then Magi's Blessing because the passive is great. But I would tend to stick in one of these realms and not wander too far further. Other items that you'll see people use and why I don't think they're as important, well, if you wanted to sacrifice Bancroft's Talon to pick up something like Soul Reaver, yeah, that would be okay. Again, you know, it has both 100 power and it has 300 mana, and again, you're scaling that down, so that's certainly fine. Plus, you're turning every 40 seconds one of your abilities to do additional damage as true damage, and it's based off their health. So depending on your opponents, if you feel like you're going to be facing a lot of tanky folks, i.e. warriors and guardians, people that have built defensive items that come stacked with health, then Soul Reaver certainly viable. But I think that pretty much scales it down. I think you get a lot of viability out of the way that I've gone. I guess the one other one, instead of Bancroft's Talon, if you want to be a little bit more team oriented and go into Pythags because of the lifesteal that's here, the cooldown, you know, the versatility, plus you're helping your team. That's not a horrible choice, particularly if you're on mic with folks. You know, the ability to just give free power and lifesteal to your hunters, you know, goes a long, long way. I find I basic attack with Kuka a lot, you know, because you're going to breathe on them with your one, slow them down. I often follow up immediately with an auto attack, and then I drop my whirlicues on them, and then I'm auto attacking. You know, by then they're probably running. I'm sprinting after them, hitting them with my ult. You know, all of those are viable, and Polly does a great job of stacking up that damage because of the passive that you see there. So some alternate choices that I've talked about. One final word about Kuka and his abilities. So let's pop out of this. Sure, we can save that. His ultimate. One of the nice things about his ultimate is setting it up, right? So he works best with gods that provide stuns and captures. So think about a Khepri, putting him in the capture. You know, you have plenty of time to line up your ultimate and hit them, and you'll know if they beads out of it. Otherwise, you're going to hit them with your ult, right? But there's another way that's tricky. Turn your tail, start running, and when they're closing in on you, if you breathe your ultimate, it comes right over you and hits them right away. So the closer they are to being on top of you, the faster they get hit by it, the less time they have to move out of the way. It does work if you're facing them as well, but this idea of both using it when you're retreating or attacking, as long as they're right up on top of you, and thinking about who you can sequence with, that works well. Think Ymir, you know, freezing them in place. I already mentioned Khepri, things like that. Even an Artemis trap late game can help. You know, call those out. You know, if you're in casual mode, you'll sometimes see two mages. So Hades, when his ult is up, you know, they're trapped. Either they beat it out and you saw it, so you don't use your ult. If they don't, you breathe your ult right over them, and they just melt. So don't think of it as kill stealing. Think of it as confirming the kill. And with that, I have completed my thoughts on Kukulkan. A little side note, if you ever get the chance to go to Chichen Itza in Mexico, you get to see the Great Pyramid there. Maybe you saw the old In Search Of, where Leonard Nimoy, a.k.a. Spock, did the narration. They have the Temple of Quetzalcoatl. And so the Great Serpent works his way down from the top of the pyramid to the bottom, and during the equinox, the shadow forms the body running down the rampart of the stairs to the carved out head. It's pretty cool. I'm very fortunate to have gone there in my youth and gotten to check that out. Very cool. And with that in mind, it kind of dovetails into this skin is sort of a nod to that, in case you didn't know. So that's the thought process behind that skin, and a little bit of background on this Mayan god. By all means, if you felt any of this information is useful and helpful, click the like, click the bell to be notified of when I post new content. I will continue this series, not only God Guides, but as I think about them, different aspects of the meta, like aura items and penetration, even the settings that I feel that you should go into in your options to configure them to your advantage. I'll have videos that talk about that. My content is based around the casual modes, and I mentioned them as Clash, Arena, Joust, and Siege. There's plenty of content out there for Conquest. I do, in fact, play Conquest, and I enjoy Conquest. But, you know, at that point, I assume you want to do well, and I assume you want to play ranked Conquest, at least work your way to that. And there are a lot of pros that provide very good content there. And the meta differs depending on what level we're talking about. You know, if you're in bronze rank, you're going to see some pretty cruddy stuff. You might as well be in unranked Conquest. Whereas if you're at gold and higher, which is where I tend to end up being ranked, then you'll see better stuff. And obviously the pros, best of all. And that's where your money efficiency needs to be spot on, and your power curve needs to be spot on. If you have questions, comments, post them below, and I'll do my best to get back to them. I'm checking every day or two to see if people posted content. Thank you very much, particularly for those who have subscribed and interacted with me. And this is Hawkissimo signing out.